back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence. Today we'll be studying Joshua chapter 8. Now, this is another city that they're going in to conquer. A lot of the things that are going to be shown here in this chapter are repeated concepts that we've seen in other chapters. There's a little bit of difference in some of it, but for the most part, I'm not going to belabor points. I'll just remind of points that we've already made, but it should be a fairly short video. So let's get started. Joshua chapter 8 and verse 1, And Jehovah said unto Joshua, Fear not, neither be thou dismayed. Take all the people of war with thee, and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, and his people, and his city, and his land. So here we have, they've conquered Jericho, and then they tried to go in with a very small force to conquer Ai because God was supposedly with them, but because of the man that went in and stole part and kept part for himself, they were cursed, and God was upset with them for not being obedient to them, for not sticking strictly with what he said to do, and so they lost. And now they're coming off of having punished Achan and destroying all of his personal belongings, and they're getting ready to go into Ai again, and God is saying, look, you took care of the problem, I'm with you, you'll be okay. And so verse 2 says, You shall do to Ai and her king as you did unto Jericho and her king, only, and here's the difference, only the spoil thereof and the cattle thereof shall you take for a prey unto yourselves. Lay thee in ambush for the city behind it. And so God says, you're going to go in and you're going to do to the king of Ai the same thing you did to the king of Jericho. You're going to kill him. And this time, however, God says you get to keep the spoils of the city. Everything that you capture will be yours for the keeping. And then he says, what you need to do is you need to lay an ambush behind the city. So he gives Joshua some tactical commands here. Verse 3, So Joshua arose and all the people of war to go up against Ai. And Joshua chose out 30,000 mighty men of valor and sent them away by night. So these 30,000 men are going to go by night, and they're going to circle around back behind Ai to where they can't be seen, and they're going to just lie there and wait. And he commanded them, saying, Behold, you shall lie in wait against the city, even behind the city. Go not very far from the city, but be ye all ready. And I and the people that are with me will approach unto the city, and it shall come to pass, when they come out against us, as at the first, that we will flee before them. So he says, you go back there and wait, and we're going to come up to the city, and when they come out to meet us, we're going to run away in the same way that we ran away before. Remember the 3,000 that they had sent, 36 men died as they were fleeing. And so Joshua says, we're going to repeat that, and they're going to think that they've got us again. Because they defeated us last time, they're going to be a little bit bold, and they're all going to come out and chase us. And then he says, in verse 6, For they will come out after us till we have drawn them from the city, for they will say, They flee before us, as at the first, therefore we will flee before them. Then you shall rise up from the ambush and seize upon the city, for Jehovah your God will deliver it into your hand. So that's the plan. They're going to wait and ambush these 30,000 men behind the city, and then Joshua's going to take a small force up, like they're going to try to attack the city again. The men of Ai are going to come out and attack, and Joshua's going to turn and flee. And they're going to be like, they're running away just like they did last time. Let's chase them and take them out. And when all of the men of the city that are going to come out, then the 30,000 can go in and take the city, and there won't even be anybody there really to defend it. Okay? And then it says, verse 8, And it shall be when you have taken the city, that you shall set the city on fire, according to the commandment of Jehovah shall you do. See, I have commanded you. So there's a tactical advantage to doing this as well, because all of the fighting men are now outside of the city. When they see that the city's on fire, it would give them pause as they're chasing after Joshua's troops. And some of them will be like, let's go back and save the city, and some will be like, but we've got this army here that we've been pursuing. And then there'll be confusion, and then they'll be caught in between two forces, and they'll be very easy to mop up. So there's a lot of tactical thinking going on here conceptually for Joshua that God has given him. All right, and then it says, verse 9, Joshua therefore sent them forth, that they went to lie in ambush and abode between Bethel and Ai, on the west side of Ai. But Joshua lodged that night among the people. So they're on the east side. Everybody's coming in from the east. Remember, they crossed the Jordan, so they're coming in from the east to Ai. The 30,000 men circle around to the other side, on the west side of Ai. And then Joshua stays amongst the people, so that they can do the force in the morning. In verse 10 it says, Joshua rose up early in the morning and numbered the people and went up, he and the elders of Israel, before the people up to Ai. And all the people, even the people of war that were with him, went up and drew nigh and came before the city and pitched on the north side of Ai. Now there was a valley between them and Ai. And he took about 5,000 men. So he's taken a slightly bigger force to sell this. Last time it was 3,000, now he's taken 5,000. And so they think that AI will say, well, they think they can take us with 5,000, but we'll still be able to rout them. And set them to lie in ambush between Bethel and Ai on the west side of the city. And when they had set the people, even all the host that was the north of the city, and their liers in wait on the west of the city, Joshua went that night into the midst of the valley. All right, so he's got all of these troops. There's now a set of 5,000 people that are going to be kind of a secondary ambush when the men come out that are going to be able to attack them, kind of a flanking maneuver as well. And so they're going to be essentially almost completely surrounded. And it says that when they verse 14, and it came to pass when the king of Ai saw it, that they hasted and rose up early, and the men of the city went out against Israel to battle, he and all his people, at a time appointed before the plain. But he did not know that there was a liar's ambush against him behind the city. So he doesn't know about the men that are in the back of the city. He only knows about the people that are out front. And Joshua and all Israel made as if they were beaten before them and fled by the way of the wilderness. So they head back out to the east, and they're running away. And all the people that were in Ai were called together to pursue after them, and they pursued after Joshua and were drawn away from the city. And listen to this, and there was not a man left in Ai or Bethel that went not out after Israel. And they left the city open and pursued after Israel. So all of the men in Ai chase after. They're like, we're going to take them out, and we're going to be done with this. They've lost already once. We're going to wipe out this new force, and we're going to show them. And so they all leave. And they think that they're going after the entirety of the Israelite army, and little do they know. Verse 18, and Jehovah said unto Joshua, stretch out the spear that is in your hand toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand. And Joshua stretched out the spear that he had in his hand toward the city. And the ambush arose quickly out of their place, and they ran as soon as they had stretched out his hand. And they entered into the city and took it and hasted and set the city on fire. So those are the men that are behind. They go into the city and they set the city on fire, just like Joshua commanded them to do. When the men of Ai looked behind them, they saw, behold, the smoke of the city ascended up to heaven. Now, that word heaven there is the sky. Note the use of that word heaven here. I'm going to point this out. When we see the word heaven, we got to use context to figure out what we're talking about. Ascending up to heaven means it's going up into the sky. And they had no power to flee this way or that way. And the people that fled to the wilderness turned back upon their pursuers. So Joshua's forces turn around now, and they're going back up against Ai. And they don't know which way to go because they've got to go back and protect the city. And now they've got this force that's coming up on them. And it's a big mess for Ai. And when Joshua and all Israel saw the ambush, that the ambush had taken the city, that the smoke of the city ascended, they turned again and they slew the men of Ai. And the other issued out of the city against them, so that they were in the midst of Israel. So you have this pincher movement. You have the 30,000 over here and the 5,000 over here, and they come at them from both sides. And some on the side, the extra ambush that was on the side, they come in. And so there's this three-pronged attack that's coming against Ai, and they can't do anything about it, so that they let none of them remain or escape. The whole army is wiped out. Ai is completely taken. Alright, and the king of Ai they took alive and brought him to Joshua. And it came to pass when Israel had made an end of slaying all the inhabitants of Ai in the field and the wilderness, where they chased them, when they were fallen on the edge of the sword until they were consumed, that all the Israelites returned into Ai and smote it with the edge of the sword. So they go in and they take out everybody that is in the city of Ai. It says they smote it with the edge of the sword here, and so it was that all that fell that day, both of men and women, were 12,000, even all the men of Ai. Notice this, there's no mention of children here. So when we are talking about the taking of Ai here, a lot of people will again try to say, well, they come in and they're just killing everybody. Well, there's no mention of children when they take Ai. There's only the killing of the wicked adults. So what do they do with the children? We aren't told. But we do know that when they take of the spoils. And so if they can take of the cattle and they can take of the riches that are here of this city, they can also take those children as bondservants under the Mosaical law, and they can raise those children up to become proselytes. And so, without their parents there to guide them in all of those wicked pathways, then those children could potentially grow up to be Jewish proselytes. And it's just one of those things where I know it's a fine road we walk here. It's very we've got to make sure that we're keeping in line with what the Bible actually says, but we also, in our defense of the gospel, show that God is a just and merciful God. And so there isn't anything said about children in this chapter in terms of them being killed. It just talks about the men and the women, and those are the adults. And it says, it's for Joshua drew not his hand back wherewith he stretched out the spear until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Only the cattle and the spoil of that city Israel took for prey unto themselves, according unto the word of Jehovah which he commanded Joshua. Joshua burned Ai and made it a heap forever, even a desolation unto this day. So again, unto this day refers to when Joshua is writing this, which is a few years later at the end of the conquest of the land of Canaan. It says, and the king of Ai he hanged on a tree until evening, and as soon as the sun was down, Joshua commanded that they should take his carcass down from the tree, cast it at the entering of the gate of the city, and raise thereon a great heap of stones that remains unto this day. So they hang the king, he dies, he's hanging there, sundown comes, they take his body, they put it at the gates of the city. Nobody's going to live there. It's just going to be a big pile of rubble, and it stays that way. And then it says, Joshua built an altar unto Jehovah God of Israel in Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of Jehovah, commanded the children of Israel, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses. And we're going to see that phrase from time to time, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses. They do it. They follow after. So in the first 5 books, that's the law of Moses. They do as commanded, an altar of whole stones, over which no man has lifted up any iron, and they offered thereon burnt offerings unto Jehovah, and sacrifice peace offerings. So they build this altar out of stones that they just stack. They don't work them in any way. They're not shaped. There's just this kind of crude stones lifted up and made into an altar, and they burn their sacrifices there. And then listen, he wrote there upon the stones, this is the altar, a copy of the law of Moses, which he wrote in the presence of the children of Israel. Now note, where is the law of, or where is the instructions on how to build the altar? It's in the law of Moses. Is the construction instructions for an altar in the 10 Commandments? No, it is not. It is in the books of the law of Moses. So when it says that he wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses, everybody thinks that's the 10 Commandments, but that is not. He writes the entirety of the law of Moses, from Genesis all the way to Deuteronomy. He writes the entirety of that on this altar. And he writes it in the presence of the children of Israel. So this takes a while. This is going to take quite a long time to make a copy of all of this. But it is just super important to them to write these things out and to have that law brought to their remembrance. So as he's writing this, the people of Israel are watching him writing this out on stone. He's sitting there with his little chisel, and he's marking out over the course of this entire altar. Like, all of the stones are going to contain this stuff, and the people would be able to come by and see that this altar contains the law of Moses in front of this city that they had taken, that God had given them. Then it says, and all Israel and their elders and officers and their judges stood on this side of the ark and on that side before the priests, the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of Jehovah, as well as the stranger, that's the sojourner, the proselyte, as he that was born among them, half of them over against Mount Gerizim, and half of them over against Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of Jehovah, commanded before, that they should bless the people of Israel. So you have all of these people are arrayed the way that God had commanded them to be arrayed, according to the book of Moses, and then they would be blessed because they are arranging themselves according to the way that Moses had taught them to do it. And afterward he read all the words of the law, the blessings and cursings. So once again, he reads all the words of the law that he carved on the altar, all the blessings and the cursings. There are no blessings and cursings in the 10 Commandments. There are blessings and cursings in places like Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. So that's part of what he carved, and that's how we know that the entirety of what he carved is not just the Ten Commandments, but the entirety of Genesis through Deuteronomy. According to all that he has written in the book of the law, there was not a word of all that Moses commanded which Joshua read not before all the congregation of Israel, with the women and the little ones, and the strangers that were conversant among them. And so you have this reading of the law after the carving of the law, and we're talking a lot of carving here. So we're probably talking days that they're sitting here taking all of this in. It's very ceremonial. It's very important to them to go through all this and do it this way as a reminder of, hey, when we do things God's way, things go our way. When we do things our way, things don't go our way. And that's just a really big lesson here for this particular chapter and for anybody who is reading through the Bible. As we do things God's way, he's our designer. He knows the way that we are. He knows what we are capable of, and he says, do things this way and I will bless you. And that's the way we should do them, because when we try to direct our own paths, it just doesn't work out. So that is Joshua chapter 8. Again, a fairly short chapter. I think a pretty straightforward lesson, historical account there. But if you do have any questions, please let me know in the comments. And we will do Joshua chapter 9 next time. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and this has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation. We'll see you next time.